Hi there, listeners. We have for you this fortnight a very special episode of the Sky Bear Games podcast. Done off the cuff when we had Ben round for a social visit, there are a few corrections and addendums that need to be made. Please see the show description for the corrections to the names of the victims of the Atlanta shootings, as the news article that Ben read from during the episode was subsequently corrected after we recorded the episode. We have also included in the description a link to Asian Americans Advancing Justice in Atlanta, if you want to donate to support the people directly affected by the shootings. And I've included a link to an article in the spin-off about anti-Asian hate in New Zealand. At present, we are still looking for a bundle to contribute to, so please let us know if you find anything. Since we're talking about the shootings, we do have to issue a content warning that this comes up, but not in much detail specifically. Instead, we spend a lot of time talking about various oppressions and discriminations different groups go through, so if that is too much for you right now, we understand. In the episode itself, I have peppered recommendations for work by Kiwi Asian developers and Asian game writers, reviewers and developers the world over, so please stay tuned for those recommendations and see the links in the description to see these games for yourself. Remember, of course, that these are just a few personal recommendations, and there is a wide world of options out there if you just look. Thanks for listening. And stay safe.
Kia ora, Internet.
Hello and welcome to the Sky Bear Games podcast.
Joining us this week, we have a special guest returning.
Yes.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, my name's Benjamin Teh, and I'm here to talk about being an Asian creative in a dark time after the Atlanta shootings.
Well, we just leapt straight into the conversation, so we're going to just parachute you into the middle of the conversation, dear listener. Enjoy.
Asian creativity in the wake of Asian hate crimes.
What was the question again, James?
Will HAO do another bundle for racial justice like they did last year with the Black Lives Matter bundle?
I mean, I hope they do. I feel like the Asian community, I feel like Asian American community is so outspoken and so up in arms right now, and the rest of the world is affected in some way. But I fear that we probably won't even have the same kind of marches, or we won't even have the same kind of reactions.
No.
And I think a lot of it might have to do with, honestly, the fact that a lot of us are just scared to go out. You know, like it's become this whole thing. I saw a friend of mine who's Kiwi born but American bred, and her family returned here for the Kiwi way that we've reacted to COVID. And she talked about how even here, because she's from a mixed family, they usually send out the Caucasian parents or the most Caucasian child to go and do the grocery shopping, just to lessen the possibility of racist encounters.
Wow.
And
that's hard.
Yeah, it's a whole thing, because in some way we've been raised, right, to put your head down, don't escalate the possibility of a confrontation. And I think a lot of it comes from fearing like you're going to get deported. There's so many myths of the model minority that are so detrimental in so many ways.
I've already looked. No. The answer's no.
No.
No bundle.
Oh, okay.
Well, I've got a few other places to look too.
Yeah, good idea.
I met up with a friend for lunch yesterday, and she said something that I found really funny, and it was like, we can't all be doctors.
Yeah, exactly.
So shout out to Talia Poa for saying that, because I really want to get that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really sad how even the sheriff who made the announcement about him was like, this is not a hate crime. This is a sex issue.
But they were already at that point hiding certain facts.
I mean, I feel like you never underestimate the ability of the Asian community to go through to like troll through your social media history to find out like a racist tweet that you might have done in the past, which is what they did with this guy,
right?
The sheriff, right, where he was promoting the sales of like
That's the one, yes, from the COVID-19 from China, like specifically spelled CHYNA as if to do Trump's saying of it.
Yeah. It's a sad time. Like I woke up on Thursday, did that thing of like checking your phone before you get out of bed, and then was just so depressed for the whole day. Like, I had a couple of social meetups with friends that I just cancelled. We were supposed to play D&D for dumplings, and I just cancelled that as well because I was like, man, I'm not in the right frame of mind to DM.
No, yeah.
And it's a sad place to feel like things are going well, and then you have something like this, and then you just kind of reminded that things are getting better, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's still going to be a lot of hurdles to jump over.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, we are so fortunate in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, but it's still scary, right? Like, it's still a place where, sure, we have had a government that reacted to the last shooting in this country by decommissioning all the guns. Sorry, decommissioning might be the wrong word. Like, by collecting all the guns and
all the assault rifles. Yeah.
Which is amazing.
You don't go hunting with an assault rifle.
Exactly, yeah, because you're not going to get any meat if you do that.
And there was even a case where I think a couple of farmers like came forward and were just like, oh yeah, we definitely don't need this. Like, we've broken them already because we totally see where this is coming from. We don't want our country to be seen as a country that tolerates hate. And yet I'm not trying to manifest this, as some people have said, that like maybe you're just manifesting the possibility of race crimes happening. But no, I don't want like a situation where people are targeted because of anything that defines them.
But you're not manifesting it though. It's like it happens all the time.
Sure.
Yeah. And now for the first recommendation. Golden Threads is a game by Alan Jia and Renee Liang. Created in partnership with Auckland Museum, New Zealand, as part of the Being Chinese in Aotearoa exhibition in 2017, Golden Threads is inspired by real historical figures and events, and explores and celebrates 175 years of Chinese life in New Zealand. Presented as a lost and found diary, you, the player, make key, meaningful life decisions in this choose-your-own-adventure and immerse yourself in the lives of 19th century Chinese migrants to New Zealand. This game is available for purchase and download at itch.io. See the episode notes for the link.
From anecdotes that I've heard or from people that I've talked to, basically every single Asian person living in New Zealand either has had or knows someone who has had some sort of racist encounter, slurs made, attack, whether it's a physical or a verbal or whatever, in the same way that, like...
Well, I was going to say, like, there's everything that you've been saying. I can think of a parallel to the female existence.
That was
moderating your behaviour to save yourself a potential violent or uncomfortable encounter. Like just the fact of like every time I need a tradesman to do something, I might as well just automatically ask James to call them. There was this one tradesman we had doing significant renovations on our house, and he just wasn't listening to me. And the instant I got James to tell him to do the thing instead of me, it was done.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, isn't it? Like the whole idea of how does that happen? How are certain individuals, and this happens with women as well, which is what I find more baffling. Like the idea that there are women who are fighting against feminism. The idea that there are some women who champion against women's rights. Be like, no, we don't deserve equality. I'm like, why? Where would that? How did you come to that conclusion?
I feel like you can only say that though, like for women, you can only say that if you are living in a society which has already had gains from feminism. What I was going to say.
Most of the women you see doing things like that, and this also applies to like most of the gay people you see doing what you might term as self-hating gay type things, and even in racial groups as well. It will be that they are maybe materially well off, so it doesn't affect them that, or it might be like, for example, with women, they've like they were born after feminism, after the 60s and 70s.
Important battles have been fought and won. There's more ground to still needs to be broken.
Yeah.
But
from my personal experience, I can tell you that growing up on the North Shore of Auckland, I never experienced sexual harassment.
As a white presenting woman.
In a straight presenting, white presenting, female presenting person occupying a female body I never actually experienced sexual harassment at school.
Well off presenting neighbourhood.
Not at like my first few jobs, and then when I went over to university, not there. It wasn't until I started working as a teacher out in West Auckland that I finally got it. And while I never did that whole thing, like, you know, posting on like Facebook, like, I don't need feminism, I never did anything as cringe as that, I didn't fully understand it. I thought feminism was like done and dusted.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then it wasn't until I actually got there and realised, oh, there's still huge amounts of places where this is a massive problem. And the thing is, like, even on the North Shore, though, it is still a problem. The thing is, I do know plenty of women who live on the North Shore who can tell horrific stories of things. So, and I, you know, like, so that's what I'm offering just anecdotally of, like, either materially well off, because I've also heard gay people who, often it's like gay white men will not understand the struggles of anyone else in the gay community or in trans, anyone under the whole LGBTQ umbrella, because their struggle is done, or at least they see their struggle as done. Yeah. And so they don't feel like fighting more for the others. I saw an interview, I think Bob the Drag Queen did an interview with a young gay black man who was all like, racism doesn't exist anymore. Wow. And it was like, you could tell as the interview went on, this kid, he lived in Hollywood. Yeah. His family was rich. Yeah. And it was like, that's why you haven't experienced it.
Yeah, so certain levels of privilege allow you to have that buffer space, right? Yeah, I see what you're saying. I had an interesting experience like that growing up, where I was raised in such a sheltered household and such a religious household that I fully grew up thinking that we had moved past all forms of sexual harassment. I didn't think that sexual assault was a thing. Yeah. And then we moved to New Zealand. I went to university, and through having, like, you know, those deep and meaningful conversations with close friends, you find out, oh, no, this still exists. Yeah. And it's freaking horrific, and it's everywhere. Yeah. And I remember, like, I think in possibly my second year of uni, I couldn't understand why a friend was so offended by me talking about how, no, these things don't happen anymore. Yeah. And then, like, later in that year, being like, oh, I was so wrong. Yeah. It's everywhere. It's so prevalent. And I've been so blind because I guess I just didn't see it, right? Like, I came from that place of privilege, and in a way that was definitely part of my journey of having to see everything slowly.
And now for the second recommendation. Look up Wet Ink Games, the creators of Jiangxi, Blood in the Banquet Hall. Hopefully one day Ben will be doing a podcast of this one, as we went and got the Kickstarter, and it will arrive any day now. This is a collaborative storytelling tabletop RPG about a Chinese family making their living by running a restaurant in one of America's Chinatowns, circa 1920. Players take on the roles of the members of the Chinese family, spanning 3 generations, who face threats of Jiangxi, or hopping vampires, at night, and racism by day. You can get it now at DriveThruRPG. See the show notes for the link.
I find it very interesting, having come from Singapore, where Chinese are the majority, to moving to New Zealand, where East Asians, as a collective, so Chinese included, are a minority. And me suddenly feeling the huge difference between being the majority and being the minority, and suddenly feeling like, wow, there are so many things set against me. I have quite a few Malaysian Chinese friends who have done the same thing, where they moved from Malaysia to New Zealand, but because they were always a racial minority, even in Malaysia, right, where there are more Malay people than Chinese people, they see almost no difference, where they're like, yeah, this is a much better country. This is so much safer. This is so much better. Like, for them, it's all, well, not all, but there are like way more pros than cons. And then for me, it's like becoming from the majority to becoming a minority, having to suddenly wrestle with that difference in life and difference in how the lifestyle here caters not for you. And it was a huge eye-opening experience, and really led to a lot of moments of, oh, wow, like, I've been raised, and definitely had moments of thinking I was the whitest kid I knew, to because I had good English to feeling like I was the blackest kid I knew because I liked rap and hip hop to suddenly, coming here and being like, you will never be either of those things.
Yeah.
Didn't expect to talk about that, but it's because of what happened in Atlanta. I think there's been a massive shift in the understanding of the experience of being Asian in Western countries. It's a huge dialogue now in America, as far as I can see. That's not stopping the hate crimes at all. I mean, I think, so that happened Thursday. I think Friday morning there was a case of 76-year-old grandma was attacked doing a hate crime and was able to retaliate and defend herself. And I think she put her attacker in hospital.
I believe so, yeah.
Which is good, but that's not the situation we want, where we want our grandparents to be defending themselves.
And I hear she was still so wounded that her eye closed up and and she has hospital bills and stuff. Yeah.
We're now in a place where I guess the main reason why I was hoping to talk to you guys about this is almost like it would have to be a call to arms to if you're an Asian creative, especially if you're a Kiwi Asian creative, you have to make more. You have to figure out how to take care of your mental health as well. You have to figure out how to make your own income and not put your livelihood at risk, but you have to create more because that's how you sustain and that's how you give back to your community.
Yeah.
I think there's a very clear causal... I mean, obviously there's always been hate crimes against Asian people in New Zealand and overseas. That's just a fact. But I think there's a clear link between the stories that got peddled by certain political figures and this resulting new surge? Is that fair to say? Resurgence of this current set of crimes. Yeah. Right. There's a clear, and it's about the stories that get shared, the stories that get told shape public opinion.
Yeah.
If you have someone who is loudly saying a particular narrative, that will influence what people think and that will influence what people do. And the only way to combat that is by replacing those stories with different, better stories.
Which is why we need all the artists making their art which reflects our experiences in different ways. So, I mean, even the fact that, we have a movie like Minari coming out and people are watching, I assume for the first time, a film about Korean immigrants to America. I can't think of any other time that's ever been done. I can't think of any other time Crazy Rich Asians. I can't remember a time when there was a rom-com, even though it's got its own issues that had a mostly Asian cast.
I read the book. It cracked me up.
Yeah. It was really entertaining, right?
Yeah.
And my understanding is that they still, the studio still pushed for Rachel Chu to be a white girl.
What?
That's my understanding of what had to happen, and they had to really fight and push back against it in order to make that happen. And
the title is Crazy Rich Asians.
Which is funny, right? Now, my understanding, though, is that a lot of race relation issues are all tied together, and many of the cast and the crew of Crazy Rich Asians have been very vocal about the fact that it would never have been made if Black Panther hadn't been made.
Oh, okay.
And it would only have been made because Black Panther was a success. So a lot of things are connected, right?
Yeah.
We think about things like, if we're talking about in the Caucasian sphere of my understanding of how Hollywood works, right? Logan would never have been made if Deadpool hadn't been made. Because they were like, we can be X-rated with a Marvel superhero.
Right with that.
And with Black Panther, they were like, we can have a cast that is not white people and have a success.
And now for the third recommendation. The Asians Represent podcast explores cultural stereotypes in games new and old, and how to overcome them and make the gaming industry more equitable by talking to entertainers, scholars, educators, activists, and designers. They also do live plays of role-playing games. A couple of them also contributed to Candlekeep Mysteries, the new official D&D adventure compilation, as well as some of the other Asian creators they've featured on their podcast. You can check out the Asians Represent podcast on YouTube or anywhere else you find your podcasts.
it's so heartbreaking that it feels like something bad has to happen before good things do. But at the same time, it's almost like because bad things happen, that's why people start stepping up.
Yeah, like, I think a lot of Kiwis didn't really think about the Muslim community in New Zealand until the shooting happened.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh yeah, of course there are Muslims living here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it was amazing how Jacinda Ardern dealt with that, because I mean, very honestly, I can't imagine any other leader, even in the history of our country, being able to be that sympathetic person who, sorry, not sympathetic, empathetic, who immediately just embraces them, tries to connect with them, and welcomes them. It's like, these are us, these are our people.
And Facebook filled with my white friends saying this is not us, and I actually had a little cry to my manager at the time.
It turned into white people demonstrative sympathy rather than actually doing anything.
So what
and
happened...
I noticed even with the government that they received recommendations about what had been done wrong, which let this attack happen, and about what measures should have been taken and should now be taken, and I believe that list has largely been ignored.
Oh, great. So what happened was, at my work, an email got sent out saying, like, we're going to have, like, a sort of a company get-together, like a moment of silence, a little talk about what happened and stuff. My Facebook feed had been filled up with my white friends doing the whole, like, you know, the profile filter thing over the photo, going like, this is not us. And I just had this little cry to my manager, who is Filipina. I just said to her, like, my dad died because of colonialism. Like if you trace it back to the very roots, like, that's why he died. Like, a lot of my white friends just don't get how much the little systematic things that they don't notice from day to day because of privilege, how much it affects us. And I just feel like if one of our white bosses gets up and starts talking about this is not us, like, I feel like I'm going to have to say something. And she was like, don't worry, they're getting one of our immigrant managers to actually give the speech about his experience moving to New Zealand, and like,
it also
thankfully they
reminds
did it the right
me
way.
Of people like Taika Waititi saying, New Zealand is racist, and you're told, shut up.
Yeah,
this is not us because we don't want to acknowledge that this is us. Maybe it would be healthier to say, this is us.
Yeah.
Us as a collective. Us has these bad scenes. Maybe we need to be stepping up and definitely stepping up and taking more responsibility.
Totally.
And like you said, with the government actually listening to the key groups, giving their feedback.
I mean, we still have that whole situation where anyone, like, when he's successful, amazing Kiwi artist Taika Waititi, and whenever he's unsuccessful, makes us faux pas, like, silly Maori director does something, right?
Every time.
We live in a society where it is considered to be more offensive to call someone racist than it is to say something, to be racist.
You just reminded me of something that I witnessed. You finish your point and I'll...
Sure. And I feel that what this ties into is the sort of general malaise of being able to turn a blind eye to it. If you can say that's not us, what you're really saying is that's not me, and therefore what you're saying is, so I have no responsibility.
Yeah.
I can wash my hands of this, not my problem, thoughts and prayers, I'm out. It reminds me of another book I saw, which is How to Be Anti-Racist. It's not enough to just wash your hands. You have to say, how am I making things better? If you're just saying, I'm not contributing to the problem, well, you're not contributing to the solution either.
I think it's because the understanding of what racism is they feels very othering. So I'm going to say, like, it seems to be that certain people believe that, well, I'm not a card-carrying member of the KKK. I don't burn crosses. I don't lynch people. Therefore, I'm not and never will be racist. And it's not understanding that it's based on tinier things.
And it's, if I'm not a racist, then I can do and say anything because I'm not a racist. I don't carry out violent hate crimes, so I'm not racist. So my actions aren't racist and I'm not racist.
Yeah. Which is, it is funny how there are people who do think that being called racist is more horrifying or more degrading than having racist behavior. Like, I remember seeing a news interview, and this couple who come from the American southern states, and they literally had decorations of black kids being hanged.
What?
And they were like, no, I don't think this is racist. I think that this celebrates, history.
Celebrate.
Yeah, and like, so they when asked by the interviewer, like, don't you think this is racist? Like, no, I don't think this is racist. I think that people will see these and they'll see, yeah, this is fun. And so it's the distancing between how, like, that happened a long time ago. I've never actually killed anyone, therefore I'm not racist. And it's based on, smaller things, like,
wow,
like jokes.
Yeah.
Like,
if smaller things are acceptable, then
exactly.
they make it more acceptable to do larger things, which then makes it more acceptable to do even larger things.
Yeah. I think I want to go back to something I mentioned the last time I was here, and that was like, intent has a lot to with whether something is actually racially charged in a negative way or racially charged in a positive way. Like, if you're trying to uplift and you're trying to celebrate, big difference between trying to put down and trying to make fun of. Like, I've come across a couple of, dare I say it, D&D podcasts that I have learned I do not ever want to listen to again, because they celebrate racism or they explore it as a social experiment. But so much of it just feels too true to life.
Yeah.
So much of it feels like, oh, that actually is happening, but no, that's too real. That's too real for me to listen to.
I feel like a lot of privileged groups like to role play slavery, patriarchy. Yeah, and I know what you're saying.
And, like, if it's someone that I've met and I'm like, hey, maybe tone this down, or your comments, your project makes me uncomfortable, and they're like, well, don't listen to it then. I'm like, well, okay. Yeah. It's like coming across, definitely there are some, let's say, games where they almost celebrate patriarchal standards, or they almost like celebrate how they don't have female players, or they almost celebrate the lack of the queer community, or they almost celebrate the good old days.
Yes.
And it's almost, and then you wonder, like, good old days for who?
Exactly.
Good old days for your people who look like you, and society was designed to celebrate and champion you, but no one else, including your women, including your friends who are different, that you allow in, but not too many of them, but some of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's still so much work that needs to be done.
And now for the fourth recommendation. 10,000 Coins is a game by Kiwi developer Cynthia Wang of TL Tonic. An altruistic but hopelessly inept merchant girl gets into big trouble with debt. With her loved one's life at stake, she must gather allies and lead a merchant company in order to pay back 10,000 gold coins. This game is still in development, but if you sign up at the website linked in the episode notes, you might be able to become an alpha tester, just like I have been, in fact. I've enjoyed the small amount I've been able to play of this game when I've gotten a chance in my busy life. Anyway, it's worth checking it out and popping it on your Steam wishlist at the very least.
I saw a play reading at the Civic the week before, and it's written by Nathan Joe, who's a Christchurch-born Kiwi Asian playwright. It's an amazing script, and it's called Scenes from a Yellow Peril, and it's exploring racism against Asian people. And man, it happened last week, and then this week we had like the largest shooting since lockdown, if I'm not wrong.
God, yeah.
And yeah, and there's so much sorrow, there's so much anger, there's so much rage. I said it in a post on social media, and it's like there's so much sorrow because the rage has to happen, and there's so much rage because there's still so much sorrow. Yeah. And all we can do, it seems, is protect ourselves, make our art, and slowly hope that things get better. When really we should be figuring out ways to accelerate that change, figuring out ways to make it so that there are fewer divides instead of more divides. So it's been insane how much change has happened. I never thought I would see people of color in lead roles in TV shows and movies in my lifetime.
Wow.
You know, like I thought that would happen like maybe when I'll be a grandfather. Not when there's a possibility where people my age could be playing those roles. There's still some stumbling blocks along the way. Like, man, a couple of years ago, Marvel series called Iron Fist. Whoa, what was that? But there's a CW series coming out, which is a reboot of Kung Fu that stars an actual American Asian woman, as opposed to David Carradine, who's
David Carradine,
who's presented as the Bruce Lee alternative. Whoa, man!
Oh god!
Also, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is coming out this year.
Yep.
And that is as far as I can tell by skimming the list of names, all Asian cast.
Yep.
Oh, nice.
Simu Liu and who was the director? What's the director's name? Daniel something, right?
Daniel Cretton. Destin Daniel Cretton.
Who directed, I believe, was it Short Term 12?
Tony Leung as the Mandarin.
Oh man, I cannot wait.
Tony Leung.
Yeah.
He's a massive movie star.
Yeah. What I loved was how social media responded to the casting of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, because it was like the young people going crazy over Simu Liu and people going crazy over Awkwafina, and then like everyone over a certain age was like, Marvel managed to get Tony Leung? Whoa! How is that possible?
Michelle Yeoh is always good.
Yep.
Always good. Yeah.
Michelle Yeoh is amazing.
She's been in a million things.
And it's been so fascinating how she's been accepted into Hollywood. It's been so cool. And the fact that she has been able to do it without having to put on an American accent. So unexpectedly cool.
And now for the fifth recommendation. The Islands of Sina Una is a new campaign setting for 5th edition that pulls from pre-colonial mythology and the culture of the Philippines. In the time since Bakunawa's last attack, the mortal races that inhabit the island recover slowly as life goes on. While some do battle with the monsters that roam these lands, others work as intermediaries, communicating between spirits and deities to help protect and guide their people. And yet, there are still others who choose to align with the terrible celestial eaters to destroy the moon and bring about the end of all things. The Islands of Sina Una is available as a PDF from Hit Point Press, and the physical book is coming soon. Link in description. I just remembered a question I had all the way back at the start of this conversation.
Sure.
In the same way that we were talking about like women who don't like feminism and self-hating gays and stuff like that, have you ever met like a self-hating Asian or a...
100%.
Yeah.
I've definitely met people who are like, Ben, why would you ever talk about diversity? We don't need these conversations. We can stop making it such a big deal. Like, there's no need for Asian people to be in the spotlight.
Have they like bought into the like model minority like...
Well, I've come across, let's say, so it's talking about specifically Asian people, right? And I think everyone has to go on their own journey. Some of them have to go through a lot of self-hatred before they're able to come to self-acceptance. Some of them might never come to it, but I've definitely come across people who are like, I think, like they'll private message me or they'll just comment on something I post and like, why would you share this? This is a waste of my time. Yeah. Or you don't need to be such a drama queen. You don't need to bring up these things that don't matter. Admittedly, they haven't tried to trivialize when it comes to people's lives, but they have definitely trivialized it when it comes to like, if, there's been something that has really bothered me for many years, and that is when not necessarily Hollywood, but any studio takes something that is a very Asian story and decides to have no Asians or as few Asians as possible in it. And then it's like, well, why such the fascination with Asian culture but just wanting to whitewash it as much as possible. Yeah. And some people definitely have bought into that, right? Like they're like, well, I don't recognize these names. I just want to see someone who I feel like I connect with more. And you're like who? Chris Evans. I identify as a Chris Evans. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah, I would be so lucky.
There's a lot of, I think a lot of people have deliberately not tried to embark on these journeys of self-discovery because it's going to be too painful. So they'd rather hide from it than try to go through the uncomfortable process. But in my own personal experience, I've definitely come across people, Asian individuals, who seem to try to sweep as much as they can of their ethnicity, of their culture, of their language under the rug.
Yeah.
Something I've observed a lot with, actually, I think every Asian person I've known is one of two things. Either feeling like they're not Asian enough, which is a lot of people, or for the ones who I do know who feel like they are Asian enough, feeling like they're not white enough.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And it's especially huge with my friends who are of biracial descent, where, you know, coming from the acting community, a lot of them have been told many a time, not Asian enough, too Asian.
Yeah.
You know?
And what that leads to is feeling like you're neither.
Yeah, exactly. When there have been a couple of people who have come forth about it, and they've been very good in figuring out a way to present how the narrative should be told, and that is, no, you're definitely both. And because you're definitely both, you should be celebrated in your way.
Yeah.
The question is, when do those opportunities come to be celebrated? And so we're lucky whenever we have people who make opportunities for others, but still they're pretty far and few between, right? And we have amazing stories now, but there's still so few, and that's why people go out of the way to see them. So we want to get to the point where it's not a big deal. We want to get to the point where, oh yeah, that one, I don't remember the name because there's so many of them. Oh, that person, yeah, I love their work, and I can't remember the name because there are too many other people who are just in that same sphere. There are too many great Asian actors. There are too many great Maori actors. There are too many people of every minority that are just in the sphere of pop culture.
Yeah.
For a moment, let's just talk about even the fact that we have an amazing film about being trans out, Rurangi, right? That got huge recognition from RuPaul, you know, and now because of that one tweet, I think a large amount of people are going to be able to see it. Oh, no, sorry, going to want to see it. But because it got signed to Hulu, it will be distributed in a way that a lot of people will be able to watch a movie about the trans experience, specifically in New Zealand.
Wow. And now for our final recommendation. The Dumplings and Dragons podcast, with our guest Ben as the host, is a D&D actual play project starring a core cast of all Kiwi Asian Auckland-based actors. I've personally enjoyed seeing Ben making sure that all his NPCs are widely representative, not just of different cultures from the continent of Asia, but also of different sexualities, genders, and abilities. Also, his monsters and situations draw on various Asian mythologies, which is a lovely break from the mostly European mythological monsters we see in standard D&D. Check it out on YouTube or in podcast form. See the episode notes for the link.
If you'll allow me, I wanted to do two things, and one of them was shout out to my Dumplings players and talk about how we're going to continue, and I can't wait to continue the narrative with them. So a quick moment of shouting out to Nicholas Contreras, Jen Huang, Jess Hong, Dilys Fong, Ankita Singh, Mustak Missouri, sometimes our crew of Daryl Wong, Lawrence Yee. We have Joey Siasoko in there, and I also wanted to read out the names of the victims of the Atlanta shooting, if you'll let me, and I hope I get them all correct. And it's also interesting because a couple of names have been suppressed. Soon C. Park, Hyun Young Grant, Sun Cha Kim, Yong Ae Yue, Delaina Ashley Yaun, Paul Andre Michaels, Xiaojie Tan, and Da Yo Feng. There's also a 30-year-old Hispanic man was injured and did not lose his life.
That was the Sky Bear Games podcast. Have we got any links we want to drop? Any things we want to push?
I mean, I guess Dumplings and Dragons. Just look it up on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. We should be on most platforms. And if we're not on your favorite platform, let me know. I'll figure out how to publish it there. Yeah, we're a bunch of Kiwi Asian actors getting together to play D&D. And man, boy, does our art matter more than ever.
Hell yeah. I will be going down to the New Zealand Game Fest. Well, we will be. Going down in April for the PAVs, where Wonderland Nights has got a finalist status in 2 categories.
Whoop, whoop.
Cheers. So, yeah, I think that's all we wanted to... Is there anything you wanted to hype up?
Nothing that I want to hype up this time.
Can I just say that, man, Rose's arts is...
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is us signing off.
Keep gaming, everyone.
Yeah.